your initial reaction when you saw the Mavericks actually were trading Kristaps Porzingis to Washington, and then at first it seems like it's for Spencer Dinwiddie, and then we find out, okay, Bertans is in there as well. What'd you think overall? I was stunned that the Mavericks actually made the move. I didn't think that they would.
I also didn't think that they would. We knew that this was a new front office, quote-unquote new front office with Nico Harrison at the helm, so we thought, all right, well, let's see how long it takes him to come in and evaluate this team. That's something he said early on, is, I just have to find time and wait enough time, bide my time to evaluate this team. And it turns out 4 months was enough time for him to figure it out. This thing with Kristaps Porzingis is not working out the way the Mavericks had hoped. So part of me wonders if they had, in the case at the end of last he basically requested a trade from the Mavericks, and the Mavericks decided, all right, we're going to get rid of our front office and our coach instead of getting rid of you. And then they bring in this new front office, and they say, well, maybe we'll just keep you around, maybe up your value a little bit until the trade deadline, and then we'll find you a new home. I'm kind of curious if they did something like that, because a deal like this just seems like they were ready to move on from KP no matter what.
So did this? I was curious about what they got in return for him. Were you disappointed in what they got in return with Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans, or were you just glad to say, hey, the Porzingis domino has fallen, and now we have options here over the next year to make some moves?
Yeah, it's a little disheartening to see what they got from Kristaps Porzingis, but you always have hope that, well, maybe they'll pull off this trade that everybody will think is the best trade ever, and think that they got, they fleeced the other team in the deal, but that doesn't always happen, right? You have to be able to agree with the other team when you make a deal like this. And this deal at least shows us what Porzingis' trade value was, and it was not very high at all. The Mavericks had to send a second-round pick in this deal, along with receiving Davis Bertans, who's kind of a negative asset right now, Spencer Dinwiddie, who's a little bit of a negative asset himself. And so you look at what the Mavs had to do in this deal, and it really tells you what kind of asset they had in Kristaps Porzingis. But Spencer Dinwiddie, I think, can actually help this team. He's a ball handler. He had a really, really good year in Brooklyn a couple years ago before he tore his ACL and was out for the year. And so I think that's a guy the Mavs have kind of been looking for. We've sort of pitched him as a guy maybe the Mavs could go after. They did talk to him in free agency this past offseason and thought about signing him before they re-signed Tim Hardaway Jr. to that contract. And so Dinwiddie, I think, is a guy that hopefully can come in and revitalize his career in Dallas, find the right fit. Pretty sure he's going to be coming off the bench, and he can be that other ball handler when Luka and Brunson aren't on the floor, or when one of those two guys doesn't have it in a night. He can come up, and he's had some 25, 30-point games even this season when he's had a down year. So I think he can bring a lot to this team. Davis Bertans is a shooter. He's a 6'10" shooter that can space the floor a lot. He can space the floor out deep. He's a guy that can get hot and hit 5, 6, 7 threes in a game. But he's been really, really off this year, much like Tim Hardaway Jr. was. And so I'm interested to see where he fits in the rotation, but I don't see a huge role for him right away.
We're talking with Nick Angstadt, host of the Locked On Mavs podcast here on 105.3 The Fan. Looking at the contracts, and I know that was a big thing for the Mavs to get rid of the Kristaps Porzingis contract, but with Dinwiddie and Bertans, you have Dinwiddie guaranteed $18 million next season, and at least $10 million of that $18.9 million the following year, and then Bertans $16 million and $17 million over the next 2 seasons. Did the Mavs really create themselves with more flexibility?
Yeah, flexibility is the game. And he used that word 6 times when he was talking about this trade, flexibility. This brings us more flexibility. This trade gives us more flexibility. Now that, we have these two guys, it gives us flexibility, right? That's the buzzword he kept using. But I think what it does is it takes the Porzingis contract and it splits it in half. Instead of having to find a trade partner to send out $36 million in one deal, you can split it up and send $16 million of Davis Bertans' contract with something else, or, you want to configure it off and you can get off that contract, and then Spencer Dinwiddie contract, you can send that somewhere else, right? You can split those deals up. So you become more multiple, to borrow a football term, and you can be more flexible in that way. You also get 2 players instead of one guy. So you're not just relying on Porzingis to be on the floor and actually play when he hasn't for a lot of this season. And so you get the flexibility of lineups. You get the flexibility of the contract. You get the flexibility of, hey, what if one of these two guys comes in and all of a sudden revitalizes their career and they become a positive asset, then all of a sudden that is something that the Mavericks can use in a trade later on down the line. So I think they do become more flexible, but there are downsides to it for sure.
What are those downsides?
Downsides are you come in and Davis Bertans shoots 31% like he's doing now and is essentially unplayable because of his defense, and he can't really do a whole lot else on the offensive end, and so that becomes a terrible contract for the Mavericks. Wizards fans were celebrating their GM Tommy Shepard when he was able to get off that deal. The other one is Spencer Dinwiddie, who comes in and he has the same exact play style that he did in Washington, and then all of a sudden he doesn't really seem like a fit, and the Mavs are still trying to find that other creator that they can bring in and bring off the bench. So, and then all of a sudden you have two contracts on the books that are not really exciting or usable rotation players, and so I think that's the way downside if you want to go get real deep into it. But the downside of keeping Porzingis was that he'd play 8 out of every 15 games or something like that, and the others he would be out.
It's Nick Angstadt of the Locked On Mavs podcast here, joining us in the Nosebleed Seats via the Diamond Factory fan hotline. Now, what about the? Oh my gosh. I was going somewhere. Oh no, I was going to Luka. I was going to Luka's excitement. Yes. 51 points.
That's a safe direction to go.
was that the I had the brain fart there, but Luka Doncic 51 points just moments after KP gets traded. That's an indication of just how thrilled he is.
Well, Luka after the game was talking about, they asked him, did you need to know? Did you know this trade was coming? Did the front office consult you or talk to you? And he said, I like to be notified when things are happening, but I was sleeping when this happened. And then he woke up to the trade news, and then he comes out and scores 51 points, 28 points in the first quarter. And I got to be honest, guys, he looked lighter. He looked more free. He looked like he was had a little pep in his step. He hit a half-court shot from the sideline in pregame that everybody was excited about in the arena. And, there was something about him. Maybe it was just playing against that Clippers team. We know he loves to play that Clippers team. And he saw Zubac get switched on him several times and was just, he was tasting blood in the water. And so he went after him a bunch early on. Maybe that just got him going. But there seemed to be something else going on with him. And I think that he feels, a little bit of a weight lifted off of his shoulder because this Porzingis situation was a responsibility of his too. It was what's Luka's relationship with Porzingis? How can Luka get Porzingis involved? How can Luka set up Porzingis? Right? There's a lot of responsibility on Luka to get this Porzingis thing going, and now he doesn't have to worry about that anymore.
One of the best Mavs brains in the business, Nick Angstadt, with us here on 105.3 The Fan. Now, to the Goran Dragic topic. Is that something that you expect the Mavs to be able to do, assuming he does get bought out by the Spurs in a timely fashion? I know I saw some reports other teams would also be interested in him, but given the link to Luka Doncic, it just seems too much of a perfect fit.
Yeah, all year we have been waiting on that. We've been talking about that since the offseason. We've been talking about whether he would get bought out or if the Mavs would trade for him, and there's rumors that Dallas was his number one spot that he wanted to go to, but now the Mavs bring in Spencer Dinwiddie. They still have Trey Burke on the roster. And so I'm not sure how much Goran Dragic would actually play on this team. The Mavs probably wouldn't have asked him to play a ton anyway. He's not a 30-minute per game player probably right now. But after the game, Nico Harrison spoke to us and somebody asked him about the buyout market, and he said, no, we're set. And so I don't think that they're going to go after anybody in the buyout market, which I was a little bit surprised by. But there's a bunch of moves they would have to do to acquire somebody. In this trade that they made, they brought 2 players back and only sent Kristaps Porzingis out. They had to cut Moses Brown, and they're running out of players that they can just cut and not take any ramifications on the salary cap. So to bring somebody else in, they would have to cut Trey Burke, who has a player option for like $3 million next year. They'd have to cut Frank Ntilikina. They'd have to cut Boban, God forbid. They'd have to do a couple other things in order to bring somebody else in. And so from what we're hearing right now, it seems like they're not going to do anything else.
So what's been your biggest takeaway from a positive standpoint with Jason Kidd this year? What's your big positive takeaway? Wow, Jason Kidd, he's bringing this to the table, and maybe I wasn't expecting that.
I was not expecting Jason Kidd to everything that he's doing right now. I don't think I was expecting Jason Kidd because, man, it has been so different than what we've seen before in Brooklyn and in Milwaukee. I was way down on the Jason Kidd hire for several reasons, and one of those was just is on-court coaching, right? He came in, and now we have seen him in the past coach a really good defense in Milwaukee, and then the next year was pretty much exposed, and it was bad, so we still have to wait until we figure out if that's the case. But with Jason Kidd, I mean, he's come in and he's really tried to be extremely positive. If you guys listen to the podcast, I have a drop all the time. Jason Kidd saying, "This is a positive world," right? Like, he always tries to look on the positive, and I think he's really trying to, change his image and change what people think about him as this guy that, there's video of him, in a past job, like smacking the whistle out of a referee's hand and getting frustrated and upset, and he just hasn't done that at all. I don't even think he's gotten a technical this year. And so just all the things that he's tried to change about himself and his image, and how he's inspired the players, how he's actually made this defense, viable defense with, along with Sean Sweeney, the assistant coach. And man, it's been all positive for me, at least so far.
What about the Dorian Finney-Smith extension? Do you think this is a deal that makes sense for the Mavericks, or is this one that they might end up regretting, much like they seem to be potentially with Tim Hardaway Jr. being rumored to be on the block yesterday as well?
No, this one is great. This one is. Well, I don't think the Mavs are going to look back on this one as a Tim Hardaway Jr. type deal, because Dorian Finney-Smith is only making like $13, $14 million a year. That's a pretty good contract for a 3-and-D guy that can actually hit the three and can defend multiple positions. He can defend 1 through 4 and is asked to every single night to defend different positions like that. Those guys don't come around very often. They are very rare players to find somebody like that, and also to get somebody that's cost-controlled for 4 years. That is something that a lot of teams try and get, and the Mavs were trying to get for years. I mean, how many years on the podcast do we say, okay, got to find a 3-and-D guy. They got to find a 3-and-D guy. They got to bring in a 3-and-D guy. And we saw them get overpaid. We saw Harrison Barnes get overpaid. We saw all these guys leave and get overpaid, and now Dorian Finney-Smith falls into their lap, and all of a sudden they get to keep him. And so I think that contract was a really good one. I would argue that Dorian Finney-Smith is a little underpaid now, and so
sure.
From what he could have gotten in the offseason. So I'm glad that they re-signed him now.